Every single Bugatti Veyron that Volkswagen ever sold lost the company approximately $5 million. Not $5 million in total, $5 million per car. Volkswagen built and sold around 450 of them. Read that back. A company deliberately built a product, sold it for $1 million, and lost $5 million every single time someone bought one. And they didn't stop. They kept building it for 6 years. This is not a story about a company that made a mistake. This is a story about a single man who wanted something so badly that an entire global automotive empire bent itself completely out of shape to give it to him. And in doing so, built what is still considered one of the greatest engineering achievements in the history of the automobile. This is the story of the Bugatti Veyron, and the man who built it because he simply refused to accept that it was impossible. To understand the Veyron, you first need to understand Ferdinand Piëch. And to understand Ferdinand Piëch, you need to understand that he was, by any reasonable definition, one of the most terrifying and brilliant men in the history of the automotive industry. He was the grandson of Ferdinand Porsche, the man who designed the original Volkswagen Beetle and founded the Porsche sports car company. Engineering wasn't just in Piëch's blood, it was practically his birthright. He grew up around some of the most significant automotive minds of the 20th century and absorbed an obsession with mechanical perfection that would define every decision he made for the rest of his life. Piëch's career before he ever touched Volkswagen was already legendary in engineering circles. While working as development chief at Audi, he became convinced that aerodynamics would define the next generation of automotive performance, an idea that most of the industry considered a secondary concern at best. He was so protective of what his team was developing that he reportedly used wind tunnels scattered across 4 different cities, Hamburg, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg, and Turin, specifically to prevent his own top staff from piecing together the full picture of what they were working on. He compartmentalized his own engineers to protect a secret. That single detail tells you almost everything you need to know about how Ferdinand Piëch operated. He became CEO of the Volkswagen Group in 1993. The company he inherited was, by most measures, in trouble. Volkswagen had a reputation as a solid, dependable, thoroughly unglamorous manufacturer of cars for ordinary people. It was not associated with prestige. It was not associated with engineering ambition beyond what was strictly necessary. Piëch looked at this reputation and decided, with the kind of certainty that only comes from a man who has never seriously doubted himself, that it needed to change completely. He did not do this gradually. Piëch's method for transforming Volkswagen's reputation was to build cars that made no financial sense whatsoever,
purely to demonstrate that Volkswagen's engineers were capable of anything. The Volkswagen Phaeton is the clearest early example. Piëch demanded a luxury saloon that could compete directly with the Mercedes S-Class, a car so obsessively engineered that it could reportedly be driven at its top speed continuously, in desert heat approaching 50 degrees Celsius for 24 hours straight, without any component failing. It came with a W12 engine option. It had air suspension so sophisticated that it could apparently detect and compensate for a flat tire without the driver noticing a difference in ride quality. It also cost nearly £80,000 and looked, to the average customer walking past it on a dealership forecourt, remarkably similar to a considerably cheaper Volkswagen Passat. Only around 84,000 units sold across its entire 13-year production run a commercial disaster by any conventional measure. But Piëch had never been building it to sell in large numbers. He had been building it to prove a point about what Volkswagen's engineers were capable of when nobody told them no. That pattern, extraordinary engineering ambition, paired with almost total disregard for whether the resulting product made any commercial sense was the exact framework that produced the Bugatti Veyron. The story of the Veyron's origin has become something close to automotive legend, repeated so often that it has taken on an almost mythical quality. And remarkably, unlike many origin stories that get exaggerated with retelling, this one appears to be substantially true. In 1997, Ferdinand Piëch was traveling on a Shinkansen bullet train between Tokyo and Nagoya in Japan. Sitting with him was Karl-Heinz Neumann, then head of powertrain development at Volkswagen. Somewhere during that train journey, Piëch pulled out an envelope and began sketching. What he sketched was an engine layout, not a modest one. He outlined a configuration for an 18-cylinder engine, a number of cylinders, that essentially no production road car in automotive history had ever used. He explained his thinking to Neumann as he drew. He wanted an engine so powerful, so completely beyond the boundaries of what road cars had ever achieved, that it would redefine what the word supercar even meant. This was not an idle daydream. Within 2 years, in October 1999, Volkswagen unveiled a concept car at the Tokyo Motor Show called the EB18/4 Veyron, a direct descendant of that envelope sketch, featuring an actual working 18-cylinder engine concept. The design had been shaped by a young Czech designer named Josef Kaban, working under design veteran Hartmut Warkus. By the year 2000, Piëch had made his intentions completely public. He announced that Bugatti, a legendary but long-dormant French luxury car brand that Volkswagen had purchased the rights to in 1998, would build a production car with 1,001 metric horsepower, capable of exceeding 400 kilometers per hour. For context on how absurd that target was in the year 2000, no production road car in history had ever come close to that combination of power and top speed. The engineers tasked with actually building this thing understood immediately that Piëch was asking for something that, by every conventional engineering principle available to them, should not have been achievable in a car anyone could legally drive to the shops. The engineering problems the Veyron presented were not incremental challenges. They were fundamental physics problems that had never been solved in a road-going vehicle before, and several of them very nearly weren't solved at all. Piëch's original 18-cylinder concept eventually evolved into something slightly more manageable, but still almost absurd by any normal standard: a 16-cylinder engine, arranged in what's called a W configuration. Essentially, engineers took two narrow-angle VR8 engines Volkswagen already had experience building and joined them together on a shared crankshaft. The result was an 8-liter engine that was significantly more compact than a conventional 12-cylinder engine of similar displacement would have been, which mattered enormously given how much other equipment needed to be packed around it. 4 turbochargers were fitted to that W16 engine. The initial output, 987 horsepower. Later, variants would push considerably higher. But horsepower was almost the easy part. The real crisis was heat. To produce 1,000 horsepower of usable driving power, an internal combustion engine generates roughly 2,000 to 2,400 horsepower worth of waste heat in the process. That heat has to go somewhere, or the engine destroys itself within minutes. Conventional cars manage this with 1 or 2 radiators. The Veyron's engineering team calculated that they needed 10 separate radiators simply to keep the car from cooking itself alive under normal driving conditions. 3 radiators dedicated purely to engine cooling, 3 more functioning as air-to-liquid intercoolers for the turbochargers, and additional dedicated units for the transmission oil, the differential oil, the engine oil, and even a dedicated radiator just for the air conditioning system. 10 radiators in a road car. Volkswagen's engineers had to develop entirely new airflow modeling to figure out how to route enough cooling air through the car's bodywork to feed 10 separate radiators without compromising the aerodynamic shape the car needed to actually reach 400 kilometers per hour. Because at that speed, aerodynamic drag isn't a minor inconvenience. It's the difference between hitting the target and falling embarrassingly short of it in front of the entire automotive press. Then there was the question of tires. And this is where the Veyron project came closest to genuinely, catastrophically failing. No tire that existed anywhere in the world, from any manufacturer, was capable of safely handling a production car traveling at 250 miles per hour. This wasn't a minor technical gap that needed refining. It was a complete absence of the required technology. Automotive journalists who covered the Veyron's development described early testing where the tires simply could not survive. Sustained high-speed running, the rubber compound would begin to break down and deform at speeds the car's engine could easily achieve, essentially turning into something closer to melted gum than a functional tire, long before the car reached anywhere near its theoretical top speed. Bugatti partnered directly with Michelin to solve this from scratch. What emerged was a genuinely unprecedented achievement in tire engineering, the world's first mass-produced tire, certified to withstand sustained speeds in the region of 400 kilometers per hour. Michelin built it around their existing PAX run-flat system, using a specially reinforced construction and rim design that had never been pushed to these extremes before. The resulting tires were remarkable and also almost comically impractical. A full-throttle run at the Veyron's top speed would completely exhaust a set of tires in approximately 12 minutes. Sustained high-speed driving required tire replacement after every 15 minutes of extreme use. A replacement set cost approximately $42,000. $42,000. For tires that would last a quarter of an hour if you actually used the car for what it was engineered to do. The transmission presented its own nightmare, managing over 1,000 horsepower and more than 900 pound-feet of torque through a gearbox that also needed to be smooth and civilized enough for ordinary daily driving, the kind of driving Piëch specifically demanded the car be capable of, insisting it should be refined enough for what he described as a casual drive to the opera required a completely bespoke solution. Volkswagen worked with the British engineering firm Ricardo to develop a custom 7-speed dual-clutch transmission capable of handling the Veyron's power output while shifting gears in a fraction of a second, smoothly enough that the driver wouldn't feel a jarring interruption in power delivery, even at extreme speed. Dual-clutch technology existed elsewhere in Volkswagen's range at more modest power levels, but scaling that technology up to survive the forces the Veyron generated required essentially building the system from first principles. The braking system needed similar reinvention. Stopping a car weighing close to 2 tons from speeds approaching 250 miles per hour required carbon ceramic brake discs and calipers engineered to a standard that, at the time, existed almost nowhere outside of top-tier motorsport. Under extreme use, these components would still eventually crack or wear from the sheer thermal cycling involved in repeatedly hauling the car down from those speeds, a problem that Veyron owners and mechanics continue to manage decades later. Every one of these engineering solutions, the 10 radiators, the bespoke Michelin tires, the custom Ricardo transmission, the motorsport-grade braking system, the 4 turbochargers feeding an entirely new W16 engine architecture, required not just innovation, but validation. Volkswagen's internal quality standards, the same rigorous testing protocols applied to every Golf and every Passat rolling off their assembly lines, still had to be satisfied. This was, by most accounts, entirely Piëch's decision, and it was one of the most consequential choices in the entire project. He explicitly demanded that the Veyron pass the same stringent usability and reliability testing that any ordinary Volkswagen or Audi product had to clear before release. He did not want a temperamental, unreliable showpiece that performed spectacularly on a closed test track and fell apart the moment an ordinary wealthy customer tried to drive it home in the rain. The result of that demand was almost as remarkable as the raw performance figures themselves. Despite being, by a significant margin, the fastest production car the world had ever produced, the Veyron was engineered to be genuinely usable, comfortable at low speed, civilized in traffic, air-conditioned, quiet inside the cabin, easy enough to drive that a customer with no specialized training could safely take it beyond 200 miles per hour. That combination, absolute extremity of performance paired with everyday usability, had simply never existed before in the same vehicle. Building both simultaneously was, according to nearly everyone who worked on the project, dramatically more difficult than building either one alone would have been. The costs involved in solving all of these problems simultaneously were staggering, and they kept climbing throughout the development process. Bugatti, funded entirely by Volkswagen, reportedly invested somewhere in the region of 1.6 billion euros, roughly $2.4 billion, in research and development alone across the life of the program. 4 separate concept vehicles had to be built and essentially discarded along the way, each one revealing new problems with airflow, steering, hydraulics, fuel delivery, braking, or aerodynamic stability that the previous iteration hadn't fully solved. By the time the production Veyron finally launched in 2005, a full 7 years after Volkswagen had purchased the rights to the Bugatti name, the accumulated development cost had made the car's economics almost absurd on paper. The Veyron retailed for approximately 1 million euros. Volkswagen reportedly lost somewhere between $5 million per car, by some estimates, factoring in the enormous fixed development costs spread across a production run that would ultimately total only around 450 vehicles over the car's lifetime. There are conflicting figures on the precise scale of the loss. Some sources cite closer to 5 million euros per unit. Others frame the total program deficit differently, but every credible account agrees on the fundamental shape of the story. This was never designed to make money, not for one single moment of its development or production run. When Chrysler's chief executive Bob Lutz later described how Piëch operated, he offered a line that captures the entire philosophy behind the project perfectly. Piëch's attitude toward his engineers was, in essence, "You will get this done, and if you cannot, you will be replaced by someone who can." That attitude produced results that reshaped the entire supercar industry, whether or not the Veyron itself ever turned a profit. When the production Bugatti Veyron 16.4 finally launched, it delivered 987 horsepower, a top speed of 253 miles per hour, and a 0 to 60 time of approximately 2.5 seconds figures that had genuinely seemed like science fiction when Piëch first announced his intentions back in 2000. The car did not simply meet the outrageous targets Piëch had set 5 years earlier. By most measures, it met or exceeded nearly every one of them, with only development cost remaining completely unconstrained. Because for this particular project, cost had never actually been a constraint at all. The Veyron didn't just claim the title of fastest production car in the world. It fundamentally recalibrated what the entire industry understood that title to mean. Manufacturers who had previously competed for top speed records using cars built on comparatively modest budgets and conventional engineering approaches suddenly found themselves competing against a vehicle backed by a research and development budget that dwarfed anything the segment had ever seen. Testing standards across the supercar industry had to be reconsidered. Tire manufacturers had to develop new capabilities they hadn't previously needed. The entire concept of what constituted the pinnacle of automotive engineering shifted, almost overnight, because one man on a Japanese bullet train had sketched something on the back of an envelope and then refused to accept any answer except yes from the engineers tasked with building it. Later, variants pushed even further past what anyone had thought possible. The Veyron Super Sport, produced in extremely limited numbers between 2010 and 2011, achieved a genuinely verified top speed of 267.8 miles per hour, 431 kilometers per hour, setting a new production car world record, though the standard road-going versions were electronically limited to a still absurd 258 miles per hour, specifically to protect the tires from the kind of catastrophic failure that unrestricted speed would have risked. Ferdinand Piëch stepped down as Volkswagen chairman in 2015, following a reported falling out with then chief executive Martin Winterkorn. He passed away several years later. By the time he left, the company he had once described as needing to prove itself had become, by most measures, the largest automotive manufacturer in the world. It would be inaccurate to suggest Piëch's tenure was without controversy that extended well beyond the Veyron's finances. Volkswagen faced serious allegations during his leadership tenure regarding stolen procurement knowledge from General Motors, though Piëch himself was never criminally charged in connection with those accusations. Years later, after Piëch had already departed the company, Volkswagen would become embroiled in the emissions testing scandal, a controversy that ultimately cost the company more than $30 billion in lawsuits and fines. Though by every credible account, Piëch had left the organization months before that particular crisis became public and was not personally connected to it. His legacy, separated from those later controversies, remains genuinely singular in automotive history. He didn't simply approve an expensive project and let his engineers figure out the details. He personally forced an entire industry to solve problems that, by every conventional engineering assessment available at the time, were not supposed to be solvable in a road-going car. The 9 or 10 radiators. The Bespoke Michelin tires capable of sustained 400 km/h operation. The custom transmission developed specifically to handle unprecedented torque. All of it exists, in some form, as a direct consequence of one man's refusal to accept the word impossible from people whose entire professional expertise told them it was the only honest answer available. So why did Volkswagen deliberately lose approximately $5 million on every single Bugatti Veyron they built and sold? The honest answer is that profitability was never actually the objective. The Veyron functioned as a rolling demonstration, an extraordinarily expensive proof of concept intended to show the entire automotive world, and perhaps more importantly, to show Volkswagen's own engineers and executives exactly what the company's technical capabilities genuinely were, when every conventional financial constraint was deliberately removed from the equation. It worked. Whatever else can be said about the eventual cost, the Veyron unquestionably succeeded in transforming how the world perceived Volkswagen's engineering ambition. A company previously associated primarily with dependable, unglamorous cars for ordinary drivers had, through one extraordinarily expensive and commercially irrational project, demonstrated that it could out-engineer virtually anyone in the world when it chose to. Every hypercar, built since every Chiron, every Rimac, every Koenigsegg, pushing into territory the Veyron first opened up. Every manufacturer now routinely fitting multiple radiators and bespoke tires to extreme performance vehicles exists in a landscape the Veyron fundamentally reshaped. The car lost staggering amounts of money on every single unit sold. By any purely financial measure, it should be remembered as one of the most reckless commercial decisions in automotive history. It is instead remembered as one of the greatest engineering achievements the industry has ever produced. Sometimes those two things turn out to be exactly the same story. Drop a comment. Do you think Volkswagen made the right call pouring billions into a car they knew would never turn a profit? Or was this simply one powerful man spending shareholder money to satisfy his own obsession